place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, February 1st, 2024, and this is episode 858 of Living Free in Tennessee. And I got to start out by saying, do what makes you happy, guys. Sometimes you just got to do what makes you happy. You know what makes me happy? Having an afternoon espresso in this cute little mug that's handmade by somebody from our area with little flowers on it. It's just a single shotter, like it's only got half full right now. That's right. My cup is half full today. Do what makes you happy. Hello, Facebook user. I love getting to the end of shows because we have these on StreamYard, we have the conglomeration of different comments from different platforms. And Facebook, unless you specifically authorize it to show your name, doesn't say who you are. So then I'll find out afterwards it's Michael Sparks or it's Don Gorham or it's somebody. It's always somebody who, is a regular to the show who tunes in on Facebook, but that's part of the fun. Good morning, Brian Norton. Food Forest Farms is in the house. I gotta talk to you this week about food. Anyway, today we're going to talk about how you find your motivation. And we'll also do our usual segments. So we have a weekly shopping report. We have the live stream schedule. We have Tales from the Prepper Pantry. We have Operation Independence, all of those things. And then we'll dive into this topic. Whew, it's been a weekend. Did anybody else have a crazy ass weekend? I'm just wondering because mine was crazy. We did a lot of chasing sheep. Chasing sheep is like a tongue twister, apparently. So we did a lot of chasing sheep, and I took an epic hike up into the back hills behind the Holler Homestead. And, both had fun, but it was also kind of frustrating because the sheep they're not staying in, but then our new fence charger arrived today. So maybe that'll fix it, maybe not. And we went over there with the idea of taking the two who keep getting out down the hill with a leash. And they're, of course, in when we go there. And I'm like, well, maybe they'll stay in now. Apparently not. They're being little pills. Spring is in the air. Animals misbehave when spring is in the air. That's all I'll say about that. Okay, before we jump into today's show, I'm going to talk about our featured event, and it is the Permaculture Jamboree, which is July 1 through 12 in Montana at Paul Wheaton's place. It is a 12-day extravaganza of permaculture. They've always got rocket mass things going on. I think they're doing a food preservation thing this time, weaving, sewing, and all sorts of different natural building. I think I saw something about making log things is going to happen there. And the way this goes down is you go out there and you stay, and in the morning, you have breakfast. They talk about what projects are happening that day, and there's actual builds going on. And you as an attendee can go learn how to do it. You can go hands-on. You can just watch. You can wander from project to project, and it goes on for 12 days. They have their early bird tickets on for $1,850. It's $1,850. And they do give you food, and it's all organic food. But I will say this, they say in all of their promotional materials, food is not officially included in the event. They do provide food on site, and there aren't grocery stores nearby. So if you're going to go and you like to eat, you can eat their food. But my advice would be bring things that you like to eat and be prepared to feed yourself. And then you can kind of augment with what they serve. It was, when I was there, it was very vegetable heavy and very vegetarian friendly. But if you're an eater like I am who likes meat, bring meat. That's what I would say to that. I would not try to sustain myself on the fare. But again, meals are not included in the ticket price, but food does get cooked at meal times. And they have access to hot water and, all sorts of different things. So I did not find it at all hard to just bring some dehydrated meals and just throw some hot water in there. It worked well for me. But it was a really fun event when I went last summer. And if you're interested in just checking all that out, and also touring the other things that are happening at Wheaton Labs, like the Wafadis and all of that, you can check it out. It's at wheatonlabs.com/permaculture tech. I've got a link in the show notes. If you use my link, they'll know I sent you, and then they like me when I do that. So do me a favor, use my link. Okay. I also want to thank our two sponsors of today's show. And that first one is the Wealth Studying Podcast. That's John Pagliano's podcast. Really cool podcast. Breaks down how he's making investment decisions. Sometimes he talks about current events and how that impacts his decisions, which is usually to say not very much unless it should. And he's just a wealth of knowledge. You can find out more at investablewealth.com. Just go there, click on podcasts, and you will get the Wealth Studying Podcast, like homesteading, almost only wealth studying. Our second sponsor of today's show is EMP Shield. EMP Shield makes a whole house protection device. It's pretty darn cool. It's only like $350, and you can get $50 off if you use the coupon code LFTN. That's at empshield.com. Lastly, our live stream schedule this week is a little wonky. We sent the email out and there was an error in the email. It said, because Tuesday lives are always at 12:30, it said that tomorrow's live is at 12:30. It is not. It is at 9:30 because it's the first Tuesday coffee chat with John Willis and Jack Spirko. We'll be talking about all sorts of things. I'm actually going to bring up some spring planting topics, as well as anything else those two want to talk about. If you want to get your question answered, show up. That's 9:30 a.m. Central. And you can just check that out at my YouTube channel, which is at LFTN. Wednesday, we have a 2:00 interview. And this is something I had scheduled in January. And then like last minute, something came up and we had to reschedule it. So we're going to hear from Julie Wentz, and it's going to be about healthcare freedom. So I think you're going to love that one. Thursday at 7 p.m., the Self-Reliance Festival evening live streams are back. So we'll be talking about what's going on at the festival, might bring in some of the usual suspects who like to tell you what they're going to work on. And then Friday at 9:30 a.m. Central, I've got Homestead happening. So that is the week at Living Free in Tennessee. If you want to get questions in and you're on the audio podcast, or if you want to send me a comment, you can do it via email. That's the best way to reach me. Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. My name does not have an H in it. It's NICOLE at livingfreeintennessee.com, or go to livingfreeintennessee.com and click on contact. And here's the deal. I'm at email 0 so far this year. So it is February 5th and my inbox was at 0 this morning. So that means I've responded to every email that I can respond to. There's a couple I like snoozed until next week when I had the information to give to them. But basically, my goal this year for me personally is inbox 0. And that goes back to January 1st. If you emailed me in the fall and you've been waiting to hear back and still hadn't, it's okay to forward that to me. I'll just throw that out there because I am actually working back through October. I'm at the beginning of November now. So I've got another month's worth of emails to kind of catch up on or file or whatever. But if you've got something urgent, get it to me, especially if it's urgent from October, because that means it wasn't urgent then, but it's urgent now. Yeah, get those to me because I am backlogging to that. And then anything that was sent to me before October is going into the archives because I'm just going to admit that we're not answering those emails. And I made that decision at the beginning of the year, guys, as a way to better be responsive and better manage my time. And the thing I realized is I have to either change how email works for me, or I have to answer emails and get back to them, which means committing to email 0. But the reality was, if you're always going into the backlog of emails, if you're one of those people that has like 20,000 unanswered emails in your inbox, there's a point where you have to admit you're not going to answer those emails and just do better moving forward. So that was the decision I made as part of that break I take between Christmas and New Year's. That was one of the things I was like, everything works better if we take care of things all the way. I also, every time I answer an email, my goal is that there's not another email if possible. So I try to put all of the tools into the answer that there doesn't have to be another email. I mean, sometimes it's like, give me 3 times so we can meet. And like sometimes you need a response, but a lot of times if you do that, you don't have the problem where email begets email, which begets email. Okay. First segment of today's show is Tales from the Prepper Pantry. And this is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And I've had a lot of talks with a lot of different preppers in the last 3 weeks because Self-Reliance Festival is coming. And I'm actually going to end up doing a show after some deeper research on how empires fall, right? And what happens when society quote unquote melts down. Because what I've noticed in the prepper world is that there's this dystopic future painted about how things are going to be during the crash that we're in the middle of right now, like when it happens. And they talk about it a lot of times, like they say when it happens. Um, and I think it's already happened, is happening right now, that we are experiencing a societal crash. And I think with that perception, there is in people's mind like this moment will happen when things crash. What I've seen happening is a slow roll. And it may, there's that quote, slowly then suddenly, things happen slowly and then all at once. Um, and that may happen, but I'm starting to go back and look at places where there have been in the world, in history, in recent history, last 200 years, where there have been examples of a societal collapse for whatever reason, whether it be civil war or famine or I'm really keenly interested in Venezuela right now. Catabolic collapse, says Strongest Resources in the comments. Because there seems to be this notion that for the next 100 years or so, we'll just be living like Native Americans did when about 100 years after Columbus hit here, right? Where it's very primitive. And I guess a catastrophic event could happen that kills enough population that would be a result. But if you look at societal meltdown in other countries around the globe, and you look at empire meltdown, what I'm not finding an example of is that, and then for the next 100 years, nothing ever improved. And so if you have an example, if like you're hearing this, you're like, oh yeah, so examples I can think of melt Somalia or whatever, send those to me, because I'm just now starting to look at it, because I think it would be interesting to have a discussion around what does societal meltdown look like, and how long does it last when things go poorly? Like even after World War II in Germany, when it was very hard to get food because there was none and recovery had to happen, people like there were some hard years and then it got better. And so, yeah, Beth says, look at farmers in Europe, France in particular. So, yeah, I want to, but when, like now or in the future, or I mean, sorry, in the past, and if so, what years in the past? Or do I look at England after World War II, or do I look at Germany after World War II? So it's just an interesting thing, because I think if we look at examples from history, we can paint a picture of what could be here as part of whatever cultural, societal, economic transition we're going through right now, and learn from that and have better expectations for what that looks like for 25 years from now. Because if we only prepare, or we only think about sort of the prepper porn dystopian future, then what if we're wrong? What if we go all in on that and we're wrong? So that's where my headspace has been. And it's because I've been talking to so many people who are convinced that it's going to be Mad Max around here for the next century. And I'm not sold on that. I think we're going to have some hard times, but I'm not sold on Mad Max. So sell me, baby. Sell me. Anyway, Tales from the Prepper Pantry is about storing what you use and using what you store. And over the years since this podcast started, we've been around 7 years. It started with a lot of how I managed my pantry through shopping. And it ended with, year over year, I would start growing more things or becoming regenerative in different, like the first way I was self-reliant here was garlic. I am garlic self-reliant in the Holler homestead. And as long as I get the garlic in the ground, which we know I struggle with sometimes, I'm never buying garlic again. Like even years where I have a crappy crop, I have so much garlic that I just don't have to buy garlic. And I've even learned how to dry it and freeze dry it and do all sorts of different things so I can have it in different forms, so I can have garlic powder, garlic salt, like all of those things. Not a problem. I'm garlic self-reliant. So over the years, what's happened with my pantry is we've moved more and more towards seasonal eating, natural eating, based on what we source here and source locally. But if you're coming to this and what you do is shop once a week, that's okay. The principles stand. And the principles are: start by learning what you actually use and eat, and then go from there and start storing extra of the things that you actually use, and then get a rotation where you use the oldest and you have new things come in from the back, kind of like at the grocery store. When you load the shelves, you take stuff out, you put the new stuff in back, if it's canned goods, for example, and that happens. So we did a pantry challenge years ago in the summer, and it was great because I was allowed to have vegetables, and I was growing all sorts of vegetables, so I was fine. There were a few things I missed, but I was fine. And this year we did it in January. With the only preparation I did for it is I did buy some onions because I knew I didn't have my usual onion stores that I like to have. And as a result of that, I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is I'm probably spending too much on groceries every month by going to the grocery store and buying crap that I either give away later or shouldn't be eating anyway. And that was educational for me because in all of January, I didn't spend money at the grocery store except for this one business trip I went in where I went to the grocery store, bought the food for the week, and then actually ate that instead of going out to eat, which is it's that alone is why you get an Airbnb with a kitchen if you're going to have time to cook. But I did the resupply for February because at the end of January, I thought, I need to go back to buying groceries once a month, which is what I used to do here in 2010, is once a month. And then things that were perishable that I would want multiple times a month, I could go get those, but I just sort of do the one big resupply. It optimizes your time and it works better. So I did that approach for February. Now we're going to see if we get through February without having to go to the store. That does mean I'm grinding wheat for the crepe day because Fat Tuesday we make crepes here. But that's okay. I have plenty of wheat berries. There's no reason to buy flour. And my total bill for resupply for groceries was $263. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that under Operation Independence, but that's, two people eating plus occasional visitors, right? And that is sort of fun. Jen says, I'm curious about how that impacts prepping for feeding people at events where you serve things you don't eat. I don't prep for that. So when I serve things we don't eat at events, I get the things we don't eat at events. I am not things we don't eat self-reliant. Except if we use flour at the spring workshop, it'll be from the wheat berries that we've ground. But I do buy the bread. Like I source the bread locally from a sourdough baker, usually, assuming they can get me the loaves. And if not, then I actually buy them at the store. And I used to store things for the spring workshop like ketchup and whatnot because I don't eat commercial ketchup. And I stopped doing it when I ended up with 12 giant things of ketchup in the prepper pantry, taking like in my way for stuff I actually wanted to use. Now, if I knew that, let's use Jenny as an example. If I knew that in a crisis situation, it was possible Jenny would be at the Holler homestead, and I knew that Jenny likes to eat ketchup, I would probably store 2 bottles of ketchup for Jenny. Or what I do is I do store wheat berries, even though we don't eat wheat here very often. Like occasionally I'll use some to thicken gravy when I'm not using something else to thicken gravy, or occasionally I'll make some rolls like once a year. And for that, I grind the wheat myself from the wheat berries we store. But I store them and I store rice because Nighthawk eats rice and Mama Sauce eats rice, and Mama Sauce eats bread. And we can bake bread anytime we want to with those and with the materials we have here. I have yeast too. So in that case, I'll store some things I don't eat. But in general, for events, I just don't do it. Yeah. It's part of it is because of addiction problems, where if I have things stored here that I should not be eating, and I know they're here, and I have a moment of weakness, I will go tap it. And, that's why we don't keep granola bars on site. And we don't, my chocolate is stored in Tactical's fridge because I have a little bit of chocolate from time to time. But if I store a lot of chocolate in my house, I'm still not adult enough to manage my chocolate intake. So I have set up a system where that's different. This week, we did hit the mysterious paper wrapped package in the freezer. That's right. The way I've been choosing what we eat is I just go to the freezer, and I have one freezer that's sort of dedicated to odds and ends. And every week I take 2 things out of the odds and ends freezer, and then I take something a little, like a roast or something. So I had in one of my like newer freezers, like the freezers with the newer stuff, I had a paper wrapped package that looked like steaks or something, and I had no idea what it was because it wasn't labeled. And so I took it out. I didn't unwrap it. I was like, well, dinner tonight is whatever's in that package when it defrosts. It was actually dinner tomorrow. And it turned out that it was pork chops, and it was paper wrapped by our buddy Ken Esch, who cut my pork chops for me from our pigs. And I guess they were paper wrapped, and he handed them to me. What I should have done was written on the paper pork chops. So we had delicious pork chops last night. We also had them for breakfast this morning because there were 6 pork chops in there. And for a night's meal, Tactical will eat 3 and I'll eat 1. So that was fun. And I just pan fried them. I made a custom spice blend with some stuff I had here, pan fried them. It took like 15, 20 minutes to get that to 145. And then I let it rest, and it was delicious, so doesn't get much better than like pork you raised on your own property and then cooked straight out of there. So my 15-minute Monday, this season is choir season, and that means that tonight I have choir rehearsal, which means I got to get my rear end out of here in time to get to choir rehearsal, which means like the dinner schedule is earlier. If I mess that up, then I end up eating out in Cookeville, and then that's usually not the kind of eating out I want to do. That's like grab something quick somewhere rather than go out to a nice meal with some friends. So I have a new thing that I do called 15-minute Monday. That means I spend up to 15 minutes in the morning deciding what's for dinner and making sure that everything's queued up so that it can be executed so that dinner's at 5:30 instead of 6 or 7. And so I can get my rear end out the door by 6 so I can get to choir by 7. And that means that we're having taco salad again, basically. So this morning I was like, what's the 15-minute dinner? And I could have done anything. And if I would have thought of it a little sooner, I would have probably queued up a stew or something. But I have a green curry set up for this week that I pulled stuff out of the freezer for. And I need coconut milk for that. And I don't have coconut milk right now because they were out at the store. So I need to go to the grocer that the Asian grocer, to get coconut milk. I think I said coconut oil, but what I meant was coconut milk for the curry. Anyway, so today I was like, I know, I'll pull ground beef out because I can pull it out today. And we'll do taco salad again. So I said, Tactical, can you tell what we're having for dinner? Like at lunchtime, and I had like the ground beef sitting there. He goes, oh. I'm like, all the cues are here that you need. And he looks down and he's like, oh, okay. I'm like, do you care? Or do you want me to be more creative than taco salad? He's like, no, I don't care. So it'll work out well. In fact, if I'd been really smart, I would have pulled out guacamole, like little guacamole pucks from my freezer, but I'll do that after this and they'll be defrosted in time. You can get these like single serving guacamoles, which are great if you want to store them. And I got some for the spring workshop last year and they forgot to put them out for taco day. And so I ended up with 80 of them. So we're not going to serve those at the spring workshop if I still have some. Like if I serve some at the spring workshop, they will not be a year old in my freezer, but I'm still willing to eat year-old ones in my freezer. Jen says, T just wants food. Welcome, K Kim. Yep. K Kim says, I started making sure we were storing yeast with our flour. Yes. I remember the whole toilet paper shortage made people go nuts, and yeast was one of the other items that sold out. I did a video on how to make your own yeast during that time because people were freaking out about the yeast thing. Pretty sure you could have still gotten brewer's yeast, though, at the brew supply shop. I am auditing my dry and herbal goods. They're all in mason jars as I put them back away because I'm moving back into my kitchen. And because of all the turmoil of the construction of the last 12 months, I have just not kept up on the rotation of the teas and the dried things. So as I unpack them, I'm assessing how old they are, if I still want to keep them, or if they should be composted or fed to the chickens or whatever. And that's just because you can only store so much in my kitchen. And because I don't need to store like peppermint tea for 9 years because I make enough tea every year. I'm also peppermint tea self-reliant, by the way. I'm garlic self-reliant. And I'm like garlic independent and peppermint tea independent for sure. I'm really close to being bee balm independent, but we'll see. And then we've still been sticking to an almost daily dose of bone broth that I'm making on the go out of the freezer bones that are taking up space in my freezer. And this has really helped clear out my freezer. The only problem is as I cook, I generate more bones, which then need to go in the bone broth. So I've sort of been stable this week. Like we had pork chops and the bone-in rib lamb chops and one other thing that had bones. So I have all the bones from last week will be this week's bone broth when I make it because it just worked out that way. But that's not always the case. And I have defrosted a pork ham from our pork that's not cured as a ham. It's just the ham cut. And I'm actually going to grind that up for breakfast sausage because where we're low right now is all breakfast meats. I need to cure the bacon to make the bacon. I need to grind the sausage to make the breakfast sausage. And then we'll be back at it. Anyway, next segment is with a weekly shopping report from Joe. And Joe says at the Dollar Tree, the drink coolers are still being neglected with none of them more than 3/4 full and about half of them empty or nearly so. I noticed the mix of canned and bottled drinks on the shelf are becoming more unusual. There's still Monster, but it's weird flavors. And there's Rockstar, but mostly stuff I don't recall I've ever seen before. Other aisles look typical. The health aisle is still a decent mix, and there's plenty of soaps and shampoos. Home Depot was next with the price of a 2x4x8 remaining at $325. They have some more 4-packs of lithium AA cells now. If you're in need of some very light duty tools like cordless screwdrivers, rotary brushes, a few different things, they have more of the new Ryobi USB charging charging tools in stock. And then Aldi was last. We did see a few holes, but found that what we wanted, all except for masa, which is a corn flour. We asked if they get it in, and they said they're buying it as fast as they get it in by the case. Okay, guys, if you can't find masa, this happened to me during 2020, couldn't get it. Go to a Mexican grocer. They usually have it. So if you can't get it at Aldi or wherever, get it there. I actually store masa for Mama Sauce because she uses it to make corn tortillas. And so that's another thing I store that I don't use. You can use it to make tamales too. So it's a cool thing to have on hand if you're gonna cook with grains. Anyway, staple prices at Aldi are eggs $1.86, which has gone up. Whole milk is $2.93, heavy cream $4.69, orange juice $3.29, butter $3.69, bacon $4.25, potatoes $3.99, sugar $3.09, flour $2.29, and 80% ground beef is $3.59. A gallon of untainted, that means ethanol free, regular is $3.63.9, which is actually down from what it was. It was up above $4 for a while there. Next up, we have the Frugality Tip. And I did not have a Frugality Tip in. If you have a Frugality Tip you'd like to share with me, email it to me, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com. But then I realized something. If you want to start a business or you've started a business and you're not quite sure what to do with your marketing and branding, go back and listen to the episode titled Marketing for Success that I did with Sue Zoldak in October. Because on February 15th at 2 p.m., our member webinar is Marketing for Success Q&A with Sue Zoldak. So you can listen to that show and then get your question covered on the webinar. Registration for that is up. And the links are in the show notes. I'll actually put it in the comments too. It's $45 for this webinar unless you're a member, in which case it can be one of your included webinars. And all you have to do is log into the membership portal at livingfreeintennessee.com. And there's a coupon code that you use at Podia, which is where the webinar is housed, to get you in. That gets you a link to the webinar. You'll actually have to enter your name and email when you join the webinar as well on February 15th at 2 p.m. Central. And of course, if you're unable to make that time, you can still grab it because I'll put the recording up within about a week of that happening. This is your chance to get a question in to somebody who's a very well-paid, very successful professional in the field of marketing and branding. And so the reason I put this under Frugality Tip is as follows. These webinars that I do range from $45 to $300 or $400, depending on the webinar. If you join the membership program, you get three of the 12 webinars we do a year for free. If you go premium at $120 a year, you get all of them. So if you know you're going to use it, it does actually make sense to become a member. If you're not going to use it, it does not make sense. So I'm not trying to get you to become a member if it's not of value to you, but it is a way to leverage your dollars and get a little bit more. So next up is Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local, ongoing, stable revenue into our lives. And I actually define local a little bit differently. So yes, local as in nearby, but local to our network too. And that's what we've done with Hollow Roast Coffee. But I wanted to talk about the other side, which is when you don't spend as much, you don't have to make as much. And, homesteading can really be expensive. It can also be leveraged into something that helps you not need to pay a guy sometimes. And between the practice of proper pantry management and raising and or sourcing whole animals, our overall grocery bills, I'm just not hit by the inflation at the grocery store as hard. I do notice it. Like I notice that if I buy heavy cream, it's more than double what it was before. But, that's instead of $2, it's $4 sort of thing. It's like not the end of the world, right? What's not hitting me, and I probably should feel bad about it, but I don't. I'm sharing with you how this is so that if you want to make this change, you can. Where it's not hitting me is going from $200 a month to $200 a week to $400 or $500 a week. And this is because I buy whole animals. So we buy a whole cow. And that's like a $2,000 outlay at the beginning, for the whole cow. But for that, I average $250 to $350 a pound for meat. And that's everything from ground to steaks and roasts. So things that you would be paying $12 a pound for, I don't. It's just like average. So As far as inflation hitting the cow, yes, it's up about 50 cents a pound this year over previous years, which is, 15% higher. But it just doesn't hurt as much. And when I do shop for groceries and buy like the full spectrum, which happens when I'm on a trip, I really do see like why, if I was always buying from the grocery store, I would feel really stressed out by that sudden increase there, because it's significant, and it's not like you can't buy. It's like it's your choice isn't like don't eat, right? So because of the pantry challenge, I really got to thinking. My total bill for groceries in February is probably going to be about $300, and that's for two people to eat. That's two people eating a meat-based diet, and that's including supplies like the toilet paper, the laundry detergent, like everything for the house is about $300. That's because I didn't have to buy any meat this month at all. And like, not only do I not have to buy any, I'm not buying lunch meat or anything because we're making that too. So that's really helped keep costs down. Now, I have months where it's $2,000 because I have to buy the cow. So I don't exactly know how to account for that in there. But part of what's happening with that amount of money is that I'm not buying things I don't use. Like, I don't have an ever growing graveyard of soaps and different things that I use for cleaning supplies or whatever. I do have 6 months worth of toilet paper on hand because I buy it a cube at a time. So next month, I won't be buying a cube of toilet paper. So it'll be interesting. I'm just going to start telling you what I spend for the month so you can kind of see it, big picture, what's going on with the bill. But that's where I'm at for Operation Independence, because keeping those costs down actually helps me eat better, feel better, and it insulates me a little bit from what's up at the grocery store. And pretty much the way I do it is by following a passion of gardening that I love. So if you don't love gardening, maybe you don't want to do this. And then sourcing local, like I pay more per pound for some things locally, or like I get a half gallon of milk a month, a week, for like adding to my coffee and whatnot. And I pay more per gallon for that than I would if I bought it at the store. But I end up using less of it because I feel more satisfied from it. So I don't use as much, A. And B, when I'm buying things in the whole animal, it makes a huge difference on the bottom line of the grocery bill. Okay, it's time for the main topic of today's show, which is the real reason you're here, right? It is. It totally is. How do you find motivation? That was my question. You may have noticed we've had more motivational or self development topics this year, and that's because you guys tend to download those episodes more. I am going to do some hardcore spring homesteading stuff coming up, but like seedlings. But I didn't want to stop this series of Monday topics until we did this show. And I knew I was going to end with this one for the motivation series, because motivation is the name of the game. And I've been watching this Telegram group that Toolman Tim put together of people who are trying to stay motivated, stay accountable, and keep on track by sharing successes, holding each other accountable, learning to forgive themselves for their failures, and trying to stay motivated on becoming healthier. This is what got me started thinking about this. And I've been watching it for a couple months now, I think. I know for sure in January, there's been a lot of activity there, a lot of people reporting in on getting their exercise done, that sort of thing. And it's all about staying motivated. That's the key. So the question then comes up, how do you stay motivated? I get this question all the time, particularly when related to managing a homestead, starting side hustles while working a full-time job, and people who are just generally tired or maybe a little depressed sometimes. ask me, how do you stay so motivated? This weekend, I spent some time looking at Facebook in the mornings. Like I had some slow mornings this weekend. I took some slow mornings on purpose. And Karita Lee, who was on, she was a lady who has lost like 180 pounds now, which is awesome, by working out every single day and eating right. That's what she did. That's the change she made. And she took a appetite suppressant as part of that. She wrote something and she said, I'm really struggling this morning. I'm really struggling with working out because I just don't want to go to the gym and I don't want to do it. But I've gotten into my car and I'm going to the gym. And she basically was talking about how she didn't feel like working out, but that she was going anyway. And I wrote on there that a comment. I was like, have you ever felt after your workout like you were sad you actually did the workout? Because in there is the key. That's the lesson. Staying motivated in business, on the homestead, on your chosen dietary path, in exercise, it's the same formula every single time. And it's this: you find what motivates you, you pursue it, you hit the skids, you have a bad day, and then you do it anyway. Because we all know you have good days, you have bad days, you have meh days, and you have temptations to go off your path. Anytime you've decided to do anything, whether it be build your side hustle or whatever. But no one has ever said in my entire lifetime to me, after they dragged their butt to the gym, when they didn't want to go to the gym, no one has ever said, not one time, man, I wish I hadn't taken that spin class or lifted those weights. Nobody's ever said that to me. Before they went, they talked about how they didn't want to go. During the workout, they complained about it felt bad. They may have been hating it the whole time, but once they were finished, they were never mad that they did it. There was always that sense of, I did it. And that therein lies the key to how you find your motivation. This is the thing about it, right? It's the wrong question to ask. The question is not, how do I find my motivation? I mean, sure, knowing what gets you motivated is a super helpful tool. Knowing what you're passionate about is really good to know, because that's what can get you through some tough times. But the question you really should be asking is not, how do you stay motivated? It's, how do you stay dedicated or disciplined? And ADHD lady here is telling you that the word discipline freaks her out. But the reality is, what you should be asking is, how do I stay dedicated? How do I stay disciplined? Number one is you decide. And we've talked about that. If you don't decide, you've made a decision, right? So you might as well decide the thing that's best for you. Two, you prioritize, because we can't do everything. As much as I wish I could do everything, I cannot do everything. I can't be everything to all people. I cannot do everything that's important to me. If everything is important, nothing is important. So you prioritize. You do what it takes every single day. Every single day. Karita Lee gets some sort of a workout in every single day. Now, in the last year, has she missed one day somewhere? I don't know. Possibly. But I see her pictures early in the morning a lot of her out walking or at the gym or whatever she's doing. Because she decided to prioritize herself and her health. And now she gets to it every single day. So, yeah, dedicated and disciplined. The other thing that can actually kill your discipline or your dedication is forgiveness. Because the fourth thing you got to do to stay motivated is forgive yourself when you stumble. In my notes, it says, if you stumble. You're going to stumble somewhere. I talked to John Willis. That dude's up at 4:30 in the morning making a video about get out and get your stuff done every day, right? No. Every so often you'll see he doesn't do one. And I think it's because sometimes he sleeps in. I think sometimes he crashes and sleeps in. He'll say that. He does. Sometimes he'll sleep a lot. But he does basically pretty much every single day get up at 4:30 and get his stuff done. Because he's dedicated to doing it. He's decided to doing it. He knows that if at 4:30 when his alarm goes off, he wakes up and he's like 5 minute snooze, that next thing he knows it's going to be 6 in the morning and he lost that time and it's no good. For me, the challenge is tomorrow. I got to get up at 5 tomorrow. And I have choir till late tonight. And that's the one night during the week that if I don't get up tomorrow, then the rest of the week I will let myself slide and not get up. That's what'll happen. Yeah, Letty says, John Willis sleeps. I thought the man was a machine. He is a machine. And no, he doesn't sleep much, but I think occasionally he does some catch-up sleep. That's okay. That's not what this is about. It's about dedication. It's about consistency. It's about doing what it takes. And it's about doing it whether you feel emotionally motivated or not. If you have decided that it's a priority for you in your life, then you do it. So, of course, the real reason you came here was to learn how does Nicole Sauce trick herself into doing this, right? Because what I've learned is when I'm feeling non-motivated, there's usually an emotional thing going on, like something, I have a bad attitude about it for whatever reason. I'm either telling myself I'm not good enough or whatever. I'm giving myself excuses, or my knee aches, or I don't know, whatever. I've learned to trick myself into doing things on the bad days, on the met days, and on the temptation days to keep moving forward. And I'll share with you what I do. I'd love to know, like, as you hear this, guys, in the comments, feel free to tell me what you do to trick yourself into staying motivated or to getting moving. Because what the other thing I found is on the bad days when I'm like, man, I don't want to go out to the roasting shack because it's cold out there. And until I do the first 2 roasts, I'm going to be freezing my toes off in the roasting shack. So, I'll wait another hour, and then I start an hour late, and then the whole day's late, right? Okay. If I just get out there and start, then it's usually way less bad than I thought it was going to be. And I'm generally pretty happy. So the first thing I do, and it has to do with the thing that one of the things you have to push past, which is avoiding temptation. So there are things in my life, decisions I have made to make real lasting change for myself and my health that are very important to me on the intellectual level. But when faced with the decision, it's sort of like the dopamine rush from doing the thing right now that's the bad habit, or making the right decision that I know is right for me, that I am invested in. Sometimes the impulse monkey gets me to do the other thing, right? Especially if I'm already feeling overwhelmed. And the thing that's hardest for me is avoiding eating the wrong kinds of foods for me. And it's like I'm an alcoholic, only I'm a bad foodaholic. So we don't keep potato chips in the house. Because what I've realized is, once since I've decided this is important to me, I had to make my entire house supportive of that. In order to make my entire house supportive of that, anything that could tempt me had to be removed, because my impulse control on that particular thing is not always great. Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes I'm fine. Other times, not fine at all, like an alcoholic, only it's a foodaholic, right? Or a bad foodaholic. It's not really a foodaholic. So avoiding temptation like an addict for those things that you're just not going to make the right decision is really important. And that could be anything from mine being food to, if you get sucked in by video games, then maybe you need to remove the video games entirely from your home for a while. It may not be forever, but for a while. It just, I don't know what your thing is that keeps making you do the wrong dedication of time, but you do. And it's going to be different for everybody. When you're able to set up that situation, it's really great. And I talk to a lot of people who are like, well, how do I do that if other people in my family do the thing that I'm addicted to? You talk to them about your problem and hopefully they support you and are willing to get it out of the house, whether it's alcohol, bad food, a video game console. Like, I don't even know what it would be. Like, it's be interesting to see ideas. What's happening. Mona says, I can't trick myself anymore. That broke a couple years ago. My brain just goes, I know what you're trying to do. This does nothing for me. Okay. The other thing I do to trick myself is this. I trick myself into starting by saying, I'm just, like, let's say I have a big thing I need to do. I'm just going to do 1 hour of that thing. And then I can stop. And my reward for getting at least just that 1 hour done is I can read for 15 minutes from a novel or whatever my reward is. I try to find rewards that are non-food based for me. So, or take a bath or take a walk with the dogs or something I really like to do, especially if it's an eat that frog sort of, I've decided I need to do it. It's a priority. I need to do what it takes every day. And I hate doing bookkeeping, for example, right? Okay, well, if I just do bookkeeping for 1 hour, which I did do today, then I get to do this other fun thing, Pilates class for 15 minutes or whatever it is. And then once I've started it, I will decide. Sometimes I just do that hour, guys. And often that's enough. Even if what I thought I should do was 6 hours that day, often by doing that one phase, I can get, I have enough daily forward momentum that things come together. That's kind of what the My Three Things book is all about, right? Is doing a little bit every single day to make big things happen. So, but other times I'll be there and be like, I did an hour of that and I can see that there's only 3 hours left and this whole project is done. And I know once this project is done and it's not on my to-do list anymore, hanging over my head, because it's usually an eat the frog thing that I'm not feeling motivated to do, it'll be behind me. And then I'm cool. I'm already in the middle of this. So go. So sometimes I'll trick myself into starting and then I'll trick myself into staying. That's just one of the things I do. The other thing I do is I'll set a timer. This is particularly true for housework for me, is the house is never all the way clean. So, and I could spend 16 hours cleaning the house. So what I do is I choose a room and I set a timer for an hour or a half hour and say, okay, I'm not looking at the phone. I'm not doing anything else for this hour. I'll do that set amount of time. And then that's good enough for today. Or if it's, I've been doing a lot of spreadsheet work for Self-Reliance Festival, I'll set an hour timer for spreadsheet work. And once that's done, I get to do something else. Sometimes it's a reward like a bath. Sometimes it's just like I get to go on with my day doing the things I usually do. Like, I don't have to usually trick myself into doing my show notes for my podcast because I love doing the podcast. Like, the easiest thing for me to do is the podcast. But even there, before this podcast started, I already have the web post prepared. I already have the audio post prepared. I already have all the graphics done. And all I'm doing after this is producing the audio, uploading it, and hitting go. Because I already know my weak areas are the clerical things, right? So this one, the next way I tricked myself is it's more like a distract myself. And this is for something where I don't have to concentrate. Actually, I do it when I have to concentrate hard too. I either play music or a podcast or a book on tape, which is like Generation X speak for an audiobook. And that works great. This is why I became a podcaster, because I started listening to podcasts when I was doing things that I was talking myself out of doing by letting myself be unmotivated, and I'd be like, yeah, but actually I can listen to this really cool podcast while I do this other thing, and I'll get all this stuff done, and I'll learn something along the way. And that may be specific to a very kinesthetic person, where I move with my hands a lot to process information, but also when I'm doing things with my hands, I like my aural stimulation there. Like, I don't actually want to watch something, I just want to hear something. And when I have something I need to deeply concentrate on, I play music that's mostly word free. So usually classical music. Sometimes it has words in a different language. Uh, like I can actually tune out the German in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, even though I speak German. But if it was English words, then it would distract me, because I'd start hearing the words, especially if I'm writing something. And that really helps get me over the hump of just sitting down and doing things that I'm not feeling super motivated to do. Another thing I like to do is entice myself with a reward. And, as I said, that could be calling a friend that I haven't talked to in a while, spinning wool. That's one I used a lot last fall when we were getting ready for SRF, and it was a lot of intensive days. I'd be like, I get to spin wool for 10 minutes at the end of today, just as long as I get to this benchmark. And I would get to that benchmark, and then I'd spin for 10 minutes, and I go to bed, because that's how many hours in the day we were working in October to get Self-Reliance Festival going. That's going to happen again in March, by the way. So spinning's a great one for me in particular as a reward, because it's a tactile experience. It doesn't take, like, my brain starts slowing down as I concentrate on the spinning. And so it's like a really good transition into relaxing. So that's a pretty awesome reward. Plus I end up with yarn, which is kind of fun. Again, reading a novel for me, it's a big one too. I don't allow myself to read fiction during the day. Usually it's something exclusively for bedtime, to turn the brain off. In the morning, if I read, it's nonfiction. And right now I'm reading the book Outlive. And that is for learning. But I do that because part of it's because of the reward system. So a reward can help keep you motivated. And if you're like starting something and you're like, okay, every day this week, I need to go home and I need to do a half an hour of marketing this product, and then another half an hour of fulfilling orders. So that's an hour of work. But I am so tired after work. I don't get home till 7 o'clock, and I'm starving and all of that. Something you can do is a reward. And if you're at the time when it's time to push through, which sometimes that's where you are in your business, you say, okay, I'm doing this half hour and that half hour, and as a reward, I get a long bath before bed, or I get to read some fiction for a little while, or I get to make a nice herbal tea and enjoy that just in silence for 15 minutes, which it's amazing how 15 minutes of silence can change your whole outlook. Those are all great motivators. Or you might just say, not only that, but I'm going to start something that cooks itself, a casserole in the oven, and get it done while it's cooking so that I can eat a really good meal after that. That is a food reward, but it's something that we all have to do, right? So that's another way I tricked myself. And I do food reward. My food rewards are never alcohol or sugar based for me, because those are the two things that I will have a bad relationship with if I use them as rewards. It's always like steak and salad is my reward if I'm going to do it. So it's always something that is better for me physically when I do a food reward. And then something that I have recently started doing is tracking progress in areas where I struggle with motivation. So I document what I'm doing in those areas. And Strong Roots Resources says, love ambient music, especially synthwave stuff for when I'm transcribing notes. There you go. I have a cat dragging a water dish around my living room. It's very distracting right now. Stop it. Apparently the water dish just got emptied. So if Tactical's listening to this, Mortimer wants water. If not, he will get it in 15 minutes when we finish this episode. That's I figured out my sleep problem, guys. So, and by doing this, so I track progress in a journal of things that are important to me. Right now, what's important to me is increasing the number of minutes every day I get exercise. And part of that is as a result of reading the book Outlive. I realized that while I do exercise, I need to exercise more. And so that became a decision I made. And then, like Karita Lee, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to go outside where it's pouring down rain and work out right now. Right. So, what I did was work on setting up space for success on that, where I moved something inside. I have a rowing machine inside that I can do inside if I don't want to be outside in 6-degree temperatures. And it's not 6 right now, but you know what I mean. And then I started documenting every time I do exercise, and not like when I'm running up and down the sheep patch or like chasing sheep exercise, but actually purposeful. This morning, I hiked up a hill with my dogs to the upper ruin and then back down. I document that as a hike. Or if I do a Pilates class, I document that as Pilates class. And there's like weight training, there's more of the cardio stuff, and there's a more endurance oriented, like the core work of Pilates. Those are sort of kind of 3 different categories of training. Swimming laps is more cardio, right? And I write it down, and then at the end of 7 days, I calculate how many total minutes I worked out. And I have gone from an average of 15 minutes a day to 30 minutes a day just by writing it in my journal. It's because of that accountability, and making the decision to make it purposeful. When I look at my journal and there's no entry for exercise for the day in my journal, I'm like, well, that feels bad. So I foobarred yesterday. I guess I'll do something today, or do 2 things today, or whatever it is. And something that I did last week, it was actually the Monday episode, I think. Right before the Monday episode, I had 45 minutes where I had gotten my show notes done. We were all ready to go. And 45 minutes before a show is not the best time for me to start an intensive project, because I'm already mentally giving you the podcast at that point. And I'm sort of in a transition phase. And I was like, well, what if I do Pilates for half an hour? So I did half an hour of Pilates before, or 25 minutes actually, 25 minutes of Pilates before Monday's episode, just because I had that time and it was something I could do, still have time to come in here and do the show. And Pilates isn't something that like lands with me red-faced and out of breath. Like it's a lot of core work. So that's just another way I trick myself into it. And then finally, building accountability. And this podcast does that for me a lot. Like you'll hear me every time I'm trying to change a habit. I start talking about it on the podcast because I just told thousands of people that I'm going to stop eating chocolate every day. And then now I got to follow through. That's how I finished 75 hard. Is I said I'm doing 75 hard on the podcast. And then once I'd said it on the podcast, like I could not afford to fail, because I had promised y'all that I was going to do 75 hard. And the only thing that might have stopped me at that point was, getting really sick or something, which luckily didn't happen. So so if you can figure out how to build in accountability, then when you're not feeling motivated, you can call a friend and they can be like, oh, come on, let's go do it. Or, start it and call me back and see how it's going. If you're in an accountability group, that works really well, like the Telegram group that Toolman Tim has. It can push you to get it started if you have to report you did a thing. And if you're in an accountability group, people ask you, so how'd that go? I mean, this is literally why my 3 things works, is you post your 3 most important things for the day. And then if you do all of them at the end of the day, you're like, well, I didn't do them all. And, sometimes you do only get 2 out of 3 done, by the way. Sometimes you only get 1 out of 3 done. Like sometimes you're like, well, I guess I'm going to the emergency room with the redneck because he squished his finger again. So that's not getting done. But then you just move it to the next day and you get it done the next day. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is the bad news. I have bad news for you today about staying motivated. No one does. I've never met somebody who, when you ask them if they're motivated all the time, says that they're motivated all the time, even to do the things they love. the difference in your perception of people who you think are motivated all the time and them is that they do the work all the time. So they do the work even when they're not motivated. So yes, go find your passion. Build the life you want to have, the one you want on your terms. But know that sometimes you just have to get started. And even if you're having a bad day, doing something is better than wallowing. And the best way to stay motivated is to ask the better question, which is, how do I stay dedicated? Not how do I stay motivated? If you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member. We do 12 webinars a year and have different membership levels. $50 gets you 3 a year. $120 gets you access to all 12 webinars. That's over at livingfreeintennessee.com. With that, guys, go out, get motivated, make it a great week.